I'm calling the meeting to order Wednesday, March 27, 2019, regular meeting of the Metropolitan Council. First order of business is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and a second?
Move approval.
I'd like to make a second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The agenda is approved. Next order of business is approval of the minutes. The minutes from March 13th. Is there a motion and second to approve the minutes from that meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved as well. Now we will have a public invitation for individuals to address the council on matters that are not on the agenda. And we would ask if there is anyone here to speak, to please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone here to address the council? No? Okay. Seeing no one, we'll move on into the business agenda portion of the agenda. Consent agenda has 3 items. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Second. Oh.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to reports of the standing committees. We'll hear from standing committees. Councilmember Lilligren.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. Along with the 3 items that were on the consent agenda, the Community Development Committee brings 2 items for consideration today. A Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for the Robert Pyram Regional Trail and various easements related to that project brought forward by the City of St. Paul. Just as a bit of background, the council serves as fiscal agent for several grant programs that benefit the regional park system via the 10 regional parks implementing agencies who own and operate the regional park system. This item would award $134,303 of Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant to the City of St. Paul to assist with land assembly. When complete, this Robert Pyram Trail will be 3.4-mile long trail that connects Harriet Island and Lilydale Regional Park to Kaposa Park in the City of South St. Paul. The grant will use $80,000 roughly in state funds and $53,000 roughly in council bonds. The city is also required to pay 25% of the total eligible project costs. The 8 easements to be acquired run across a group of contiguous parcels along East Lafayette Road near Holman Field, just south of downtown St. Paul. So, Madam Chair, I would move that the Metropolitan Council approve the grant of up to $134,303 to the City of St. Paul for acquiring the 8 trail easements comprising 54,902 square feet. Also the series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are the part descriptions of the parcels. Also authorize the Community Development Director to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenants on behalf of City Council, and consider, although this is not an approval, reimbursing the City of St. Paul for up to $44,767 from its share of future regional parks bonding program, and also inform the city that the council does not under any circumstances represent or guarantee that the council will grant this future reimbursement. So I would move that item for approval.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I have a
Yes, Councilmember Chambliss.
question about how many cities have requested reimbursement in the past.
Oh, okay. Ms. Brajas, you can come up and answer that question for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. This is the Parks Acquisition Opportunity Fund. Regularly, first come, first serve, implementing agencies request funds out of this as they have opportunities. It's pretty typical for implementing agencies to request future reimbursement consideration. So as part of that future reimbursement consideration, what the staff do is ensure that the activities that they are undertaking and requesting future reimbursement consideration are eligible activities for future.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can add a little more light to that as well. Having served on the MPOSC as the MPOSC liaison for several years, if the agency does get reimbursement in the future, it comes out of a pool of money that is shared with the agencies by formula. So they have their chunk of money and they can ask for new projects, or if they've paid ahead where they've been doing projects before the money was available with their own funds, they can ask for reimbursement for projects that they have already completed or land acquisitions that they have already undertaken as part of that chunk of money that's allocated to them. It wouldn't take any money away from any of the other agencies.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this item? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Councilmember Lilligren.
thank you, Madam Chair. Item 2019-59 would award project-based vouchers to 2 housing projects. The Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority, the Metro HRA, offered 15 project-based vouchers to housing owners and developers in conjunction with Minnesota Housing's consolidated request for proposals process in 2018. The top 2 scoring projects being recommended for vouchers. One is Minnetonka Heights project in Minnetonka, and the recommended action, or the proposed action, would award 9 project-based vouchers to that project. The other project would receive 6 vouchers. That's the Trail Point Ridge in Eden Prairie. The Minnetonka Heights project is an existing 172-unit complex containing 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartments and townhomes. A new owner purchased the property in January of 2018 and is completing some unit upgrades and increasing the rents. The new owner is putting together a variety of tools to maintain the affordability for existing residents. This includes a new Section 8 contract and enhanced vouchers from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and project-based vouchers from the Metro HRA. Project-based vouchers will help prevent displacement of existing residents and allow them to remain living at Minnetonka Heights. The Trail Point Ridge is new construction. It's 58 units of mixed income rental housing in Eden Prairie. The project is part of a larger redevelopment which integrates multi-generational housing with a variety of product types and services at a variety of income levels. The 6 project-based vouchers will be used to provide permanent supportive housing for persons with disabilities. This project also contains 7 units that will serve single adults experiencing homelessness. This project was awarded $903,000 Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Demonstration Account Award in 2018. So I would move that the Metropolitan Council approve the award of 15 project-based vouchers to Minnetonka Heights and Trail Point Ridge, and authorize staff to execute the necessary documents with the project owners.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Councilmember Sterner.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just had kind of a question. When you look at these projects, do they look at sustainability of the project and operating costs, like with energy and durability of the buildings as well? Does that come into it at all, or is that not even part of the discussion?
Excellent questions. Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon, council members, Madam Chair. Council member, the proposals are first ranked through Minnesota Housing and its funding partners, which includes the council. And so there are lots of criteria that the projects are scored upon, which includes green building materials. And so projects that are deemed financially feasible through Minnesota Housing, so in other words, they're getting the other financing to move forward and become feasible, are then forwarded to the Metro HRA for scoring. And then we score them based on the criteria that's listed in the business item.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question. Will there be any other vouchers accepted into either of these projects, non-project-based vouchers?
Ms. Smith.
Madam Chair and council member, there are existing voucher holders living there, so they do accept housing choice vouchers as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next are reports from the Management Committee. Councilmember Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 business items for consideration today. The first item is business item 2019-53, which is a law enforcement labor services contract with local law enforcement or local LELS Local 433. The Met Council's labor agreement with the law enforcement services expired on December 31st, 2017. The union represents 100 full-time police officers who work for the Metropolitan Transit Police Department. After approximately 12 months of negotiations, the union reached a tentative agreement on February 13th, 2019, which was ratified by the membership on February 28th, 2019. The highlights of the agreement include a 3-year contract effective January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2020, 2.5% general wage increase each year of the contract for all eligible employees in the unit, adjustments in employee responsibility for healthcare insurance premiums consistent with the council's benefit policies, an adjustment to annual leave accruals, creating administrative consistency and equity with other union contracts. The wages and benefits negotiated in this agreement are consistent with the agreements in place with the council's other labor unions. The cost of the labor agreement was reviewed by finance and was negotiated within the economic parameters established by the council. And this item was reviewed and approved by the management committee on March 13th, 2019. One thing of note that we learned at the management committee is that this cycle we've done generally 3-year agreements with most of the unions, where in the past we've done 1 or 2-year agreements. So it's just been a change as a result of just during this negotiating cycle, give ourselves a little bit more labor peace and longer contracts and more certainty. So, Madam Chair, the Management Committee moves to approve and authorize the Regional Administrator to enter into the labor agreement with the Law Enforcement Labor Services Local 432 effective January 1st, 2018 through December 31st, 2020.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Yes.
Madam
Councilmember
Chair,
Minto.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Ferguson, is the contract retroactive to January of 2018?
January 1st, 2018.
Okay.
Yes.
And do any of the bargaining units in the Met Council do interest-based bargaining with management by chance?
That I could not.
Ms. Cordes, would you
Marcy Cordes?
be able to help us with that?
Good afternoon, council members, Madam Chair. My name is Marcy Cordes, and I am the council's Chief Labor Relations Officer. And in response to your question, certainly in the 3 years that I have been here, we have not engaged in any interest-based collective bargaining. It may have been part of the history of the council prior to my time here.
Thank you. Councilmember Zarin.
Madam Chair, I would like to know what delayed the negotiations in this process. It seems it took quite a long time. I know we have a new council. There's new. Could you explain maybe why this contract wasn't negotiated in a little more timely manner?
Ms. Cordes.
Madam Chair, council members, it's not unusual for police negotiations actually to be a little more prolonged. We see that quite often with public agencies in the metropolitan area. However, in our case, we did have some internal union changes in leadership that resulted in the suspension of bargaining for several months. They made a decision to migrate from representation by Teamsters to representation with law enforcement labor services, and it took a while for that process and election to unfold, which is overseen by another state agency, the Bureau of Mediation Services.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Chair Ferguson.
Thank you. We'll look at the next 2 agenda items at the same together because they're similar. Business item 2019-57 and business item 2019-58 are legal services contract amendments related to the Southwest Light Rail Corridor. The council is acquiring property from 153 property owners. Staff reported at the beginning of the month that there are 102 parcels in some stage of condemnation process. At the time the council authorized condemnation for the project in 2017, staff anticipated that MnDOT legal counsel would prepare much of the condemnation documentation and file actions. It was unknown at the time exactly how many parcels would put into condemnation. In November 2016 and October 2017, the council executed $250,000 sole source contracts with Best and Flanagan and Kennedy and Graven, respectively. These contracts would provide legal services and support of property acquisition if needed. By early 2018, it was determined that neither MnDOT legal staff nor the council's Office of General Counsel had the capacity to handle all the Southwest LRT condemnations and relocation activities. As a result, the council started using these contracts to provide legal services for property acquisition activities. The Best and Flanagan contract had been amended twice, and the Kennedy and Graven contract has been amended once. Given the volume of the work, the council is in the process of competitively procuring new master contracts totaling $2.2 million and anticipates bringing that to the council in May. In the meantime, there are several commissioners' hearings and relocation claims that need legal support. The council is amending these contracts to ensure we have legal support while we procure new contracts. There are two business items. We'll do the first business item, Madam Chair. I'd move that the Metropolitan Council approve the sole source contract amendment for legal services for real estate acquisition and relocation for the Southwest LRT project with Kennedy and Graven 17P225 to increase the contract amount by $150,000 to a total contract amount of $650,000.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
The second motion, Madam Chair, is move that the Metropolitan Council approve a sole source contract amendment for legal services for real estate acquisition for the Southwest LRT project with Best and Flanagan LLP 16P296 to increase the contract amount by $140,000 to a total contract amount of $840,000.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next are reports from the Transportation Committee. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, council members, business item number 2019-56 is regarding a construction contract for the Mall of America curve replacement project. This is an asset preservation project that will replace rail at the Mall of America, replace crossover castings at MOA and at 28th Avenue, and relocate the bump post at MOA beginning on May 31st, 2019 through June 10th, 2019. On January 17, 2019, an invitation for bids was issued. 2 bids were received. Metro Transit reviewed the bids and found them responsible and responsive. Bids met the DBE goals, and Metro Transit determined that the low bid was fair and reasonable and was in the best interest of Metropolitan Council. On March 11, 2019, the Transportation Committee approved the request to execute the construction contract 18P289 to Railworks Track System. Therefore, Madam Chair, I move that the Metropolitan Council authorize the Regional Administrator to award and execute a construction contract for Mall of America curve replacement project with Railworks Track System in the amount of $2,880,000.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to transportation. I'm sorry, we just did transportation. Other business. We're moving into other business. Okay. Our first information item today is an item regarding transit project status update by Metro Transit and Metropolitan Transportation Services. Welcome, Nick, Mary Sue, and Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Mary Sue Abel, and I am the interim project director for the Blue Line Extension project. I have been with the council for 12 years. I started in engineering and facilities, and then worked on the Central Corridor project and transitioned to the Blue Line Extension project at the end of 2014 when we opened up the project office. Today I'd like to give you a little bit of information about our project. So the Blue Line Extension is an extension of the existing Blue Line project that opened, our Blue Line that opened in 2004, and it will connect the cities of Minneapolis, Golden Valley, Robbinsdale, Crystal, and Brooklyn Park. And it will connect at Target Field, where people in the Northwest communities then will have access to the North Star, our other existing light rail lines, as well as several local and express bus service. There are 11 stations on the line, and the alignment is 13.5 miles long. The alignment runs east to west, coming out of Minneapolis along Olson Memorial Highway for about 2 miles before it turns to the north, and for nearly 8 miles is in a BNSF corridor through Golden Valley, Robbinsdale, and Crystal. And then up in Brooklyn Park, it moves over to West Broadway to north of 610, and the most northerly station, the Oak Grove Parkway station, is adjacent to the Target North campus up in Brooklyn Park. And then to the west of that station, there will be a new operations and maintenance facility. Our 90% design estimate has our project budget at $1.536 billion. The anticipated funding for this project is 49% federal, which is approximately $753 million, and then 51% local funding, or $783 million. All of the local funding for this project has been committed. You can see on the pie chart here who the local funders are for this project. Primarily, or the largest funder is Hennepin County and Hennepin County Regional Rail, as well as CTIB, before they dissolved, had money for this project as well. And then MnDOT, Brooklyn Park, and the state also round out our local funding for the project.
If we can pause for a moment, I think there's a question. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Councilmember Cummings, could you share what's the approximate areas for the geography for that 8 miles of shared rail line?
Councilmember, or Madam Chair, Councilmember, so when it turns at Olson Memorial Highway, we're on the west is Theodore Wirth Park, which is in Golden Valley, and then on the east is north is part of Minneapolis. And so then it goes up into, is this the information you're looking for?
Yeah, what's the other end of that?
Yep.
8 mile
And then
marker?
it goes through downtown Robbinsdale and then into Crystal. And at that point, then we're running parallel to Highway 81, Bottineau Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
You with me?
Mm-hmm.
And then we go just north of 694. Let me go back one, that might help too. And then just north of 694 is where we then depart the BNSF corridor and jog over to West Broadway and go up West Broadway.
Perfect.
That help?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions before we proceed? Yes? No? No? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So I just wanted to share that to date, through February, we have spent $123.5 million on the project. That has primarily constitutes our professional services to get us to the 90% design phase of the project, as well as a small construction project that we had to replace the Bassett Creek Tunnel under Olson Memorial Highway. So our project milestones to date. In March of 2014, Hennepin County, who was the original sponsor for this project, did publish the draft environmental impact statement. And in August of 2014, the FTA approved the project to enter into the project development phase of the FTA's capital, or the New Starts Capital Investment Grant Program. From that point, the projects have 2 years to complete the environmental process. And in July of 2016, we did publish our final environmental impact statement. Prior to July of 2016, in March of 2016, one of the state requirements is the municipal consent process. And we did achieve that with our cities and Hennepin County in March of 2016. Following publication of the final environmental impact statement, the FTA did issue the record of decision, which is the FTA's confirmation that all of the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act have been met for the project. Another major milestone was in in January of 2017, then the FTA granted the project entry into the engineering phase of the project. So then throughout 2017 and 2018, the project proceeded to complete 90% plans. That includes the civil design, systems, and the operations and maintenance facility. And then kind of where we are today, in about around quarter three of 2018, the project, we made a decision to slow down project activities because we had not yet been able to successfully negotiate shared use with in the nearly 8-mile corridor with BNSF. And so we wanted to slow down our project spending so that we could preserve that for the future as we work to negotiate with BNSF. So we are continuing to advance some elements, particularly some environmental elements, to bring them up to the 90% phase. So some archaeological work and a statue that we had to work on with the city of Minneapolis for a relocation of the Floyd B. Olson statue. We do have staff that are supporting the Southwest project on the design for the Franklin Operations and Maintenance Facility. And then a lot of the remaining staff that we have, we worked to find other temporary positions for them within the council, Metro Transit and the council both, so that we could maintain them on the project, but that they could have temporary assignments and help out in other areas around the council. We do continue to meet with the FTA on a quarterly basis and provide monthly reports to them. So I guess going on to the last item, meeting with BNSF to discuss technical comments. This is the main goal of the project right now, is to reach an agreement with BNSF on the nearly 8 miles of shared track space. This will then allow us to continue moving forward with the project. The Met Council has asked BNSF to meet and discuss the technical issues, and we've heard from them several times no in the past. But they have agreed to meet now to discuss technical issues. I think BNSF recognizes that we have had a change of leadership in the state, and they're willing to share their position and comments with us. So we're looking forward to that. We're working on the details of that meeting right now, and that really is the major next step for the project moving forward. So I would answer any questions.
Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, Councilmember Ferguson.
is there any reason do they have to come to an agreement, or could we be in a spot where we've done all this work and now we can't go through use their rail line?
Madam Chair, Council Member, BNSF is, we know from Southwest experience and other experience that, they are tough, to negotiate with, but they don't have to come to an agreement with us. We don't have the right for eminent domain, so it does make it a little bit more challenging to deal with them. I don't know if Meredith wants to.
Certainly, yeah. Should we add on to that?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Mary Sue is correct that BNSF is under no obligation to make a deal with us. Chairman Oberstar used to say that Abraham Lincoln gave everything away to the railroads, and in some respects he wasn't wrong. Class 1 federally recognized Class 1 railroads have quite a bit of power and operate under federal law, and so even our powers under state law don't apply. And so we cannot condemn them, we cannot force them to make a deal. This is their trackage and their space, and so they have to decide to let us in.
Yes, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, I just want to echo that as a East Side St. Paul resident and constituent and someone who once handled constituent complaints for Mayor Coleman. When we get noise complaints from the rail yards, the railroad companies are notoriously non-responsive because they have thorough oversight.
And I believe, as you said, I know with Southwest, we were up against BNSF with a nope, and then all of a sudden it was open to discussion and was resolved, so.
And we're appreciative, you know, that we are going to be able to come to the table with them and at least have a meeting to hear their comments, so.
Sure. Yes, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
To that point, what's the difference in length of space we're talking about comparatively to the Southwest LRT project? Do you know? And that's a random question, I realize, but.
Madam Chair, Council Member, Southwest is working with BNSF on a little bit over a mile, about 1.2 miles, and we're almost 8 miles.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. I'm Charles Carlson. I'm the Director of BRT Projects. It was my pleasure to make an introduction to several of you at Transportation Committee the other night, and we'll go into sort of the next level of detail on a few of the bus rapid transit projects. I'm really looking forward to continuing work more directly with each of you, and especially for you to meet the project and program managers that really advance these projects for the council. So none of the three of them could make it here tonight to join in this, but we'll give the overview. We do have a number of tours coming up of several lines, so this would be the really in-depth opportunity to see the what and the who in even more detail than we'll be able to present tonight. But generally speaking, we'll talk about bus rapid transit, and then we'll talk about three of the projects that we have underway. So when we put them all together, there's about 14 corridors that we're looking at right now. This list could grow as well. For significant investment in a major change to the bus system by implementing bus rapid transit, providing both a augment to our existing and planned rail system, as well as direct access to as many as 1 out of every 3 jobs in the region. So significant reach of a high quality transitway service. Within the Met Council's policy, within the transportation policy plan, there's 3 ways that we define BRT in policy. One is arterial BRT, one is highway BRT, one is dedicated BRT. We came up with this really before we had actually designed or built any of these. And what we found in the process of doing that is we have these 3 types, but they're really more alike than they are different. And so in each of these cases, it's all about providing a faster ride and a higher quality experience for our customers. All of these are about frequent bi-directional all-day service. All of these are about taking advantage of transit travel advantages, bus-only shoulders or dedicated lanes where available. All of them have features such as enhanced stations with the same amenities regardless of which type of BRT they are. They all have increased maintenance efforts. They all have prepayment of fares. So what we found in practice is that really all of these are about a higher level of investment and a greater customer experience for our customers. And we've really begun to also see a blending of some of the characteristics of these projects. So on the A line, for example, where we're operating on Trunk Highway 51 on the north part of Snelling Avenue, we run in a bus-only shoulder lane. So there's a blending in each of these projects in terms of the way that we're providing an improved service to our customers. We'll talk about the Metro Orange Line BRT, which has very exciting news coming to it soon. This Orange Line BRT begins in downtown Minneapolis and then travels along 35W from downtown to Burnsville. Future extension, possibly to Lakeville, is also under a planning process by Dakota County. But the base Orange Line project that is been put together as a project is shown here. This corridor is the busiest express bus corridor that we have as a region, carrying about 14,000 customers on an average day. We would increase that significantly with the introduction of BRT, with additional service and new destinations. Really what the Orange Line is doing is building on a lot of past experience and past investment on 35W for bus transit. We've implemented managed lanes on the corridor to provide a congestion-free travel time. We've implemented a median station at 46th Street in Minneapolis. We've done other incremental investments along the way over a span of 40 years, actually. So 35W was the first express bus corridor in the region. The Orange Line completes the vision for this line by adding new stations as well as new infrastructure, new guideway investment to complete this project's vision. We're very good at bringing people into downtown Minneapolis in the morning and out of downtown Minneapolis in the evening. We're not, because of a lack of infrastructure, very good at bringing people between destinations throughout the day in this corridor. We have to take very circuitous routes to connect all the destinations up. The Orange Line will fix this by providing quick linkages and improved stations so that we can do this quickly and efficiently. The Orange Line schedule, this is showing the future schedule. Really, the planning for this line began in 2013 in earnest, following many years of contemplated improvements to the corridor. We entered the Federal Capital Investment Grant Small Starts program in 2014 and have since progressed within that program, completing environmental review, completing our engineering phase, and actually beginning construction ahead of the actual grant award in partnership with the Minnesota DOT. MnDOT is reconstructing 35W between not only 42nd Street and downtown Minneapolis, including parts of I-94. If you've not seen it, I'd be surprised. There's very significant work underway. There's a virtual city of construction activity inside the median of the freeway. And through the leadership of the previous administration, the state, and our local partners, we are able to advance significant project scope that would be a one-time opportunity for the Orange Line within the scope of that MnDOT project, and actually got federal permission to begin that work early. So that work continues. We're entering our third year of that construction work with years ahead of us. We're now at the point where we'll be catching up to that work with the rest of the project. So two pieces of infrastructure that are remaining. One would be the construction of a Knox Avenue transitway. This would be connecting the Best Buy headquarters in Richfield with Bloomington through a new underpass underneath 494 for buses only. We're planning a tour on this where we can describe this in a lot more detail, but that's the next package that'll be coming up. We're hopeful that the council will be able to award construction for that project in May, so that will be coming up soon. The package after that would relate to stations construction, so a smaller piece, but an essential component of the project overall. Constructing both of these elements while the MnDOT work continues will all come together in the end of 2021 when we'll begin revenue service for the Orange Line. So we're very excited for that to occur.
Madam Chair, just one.
Excuse me, yes, Councilmember Ferguson.
Is the work on Knox Avenue, was that part of the reconstruction of 35W and 495?
Madam Chair and Councilmember, no, it is not. It's a separate and very closely coordinated piece. So this is one of the significant points of coordination with MnDOT over the past couple of years to ensure that what we move forward with gives them both the flexibility and the confidence to have our project proceed ahead of that coming some years later.
Any other questions at this pause? Please continue.
Thank you. The Orange Line budget is approximately $150 million. All of these funds have been secured. The most recent and final installation was announced by the FTA back in November. In late November, they announced that they would be allocating their $74 million share to the project. So that began a process that is nearing completion of actually executing that grant. So the latest on that is that the FTA has submitted the grant they've completed their initial reviews and submitted it to the Department of Labor, who goes through a Department of Labor review and then That leads to a 10-day congressional review that you'll hear about once it goes to Congress. At the end of that 10-day period, FTA executes the grant, and then we're able to execute that grant on our side, and then we have access and full funding officially secured. But at this point, it's really working through the process. The funding decision came when FTA allocated the funds to the project last November. So very excited about that because it means we can execute these other contracts and get this work underway toward that date in 2021.
Thank you.
I'll move on, pending any Orange Line questions, I'll move on to the Gold Line. The Gold Line is the next project that we'll show tonight. This is an East Metro project, so it connects downtown St. Paul to the city of Woodbury via St. Paul, Landfall, Oakdale, Maplewood, and Woodbury. So this is a dedicated guideway BRT project. Much of this project involves the construction of a BRT-only guideway in between I-94 and the adjacent frontage roads along I-94. So a significant roadway construction project for the BRT vehicles. It's a 10-mile project. We'd be constructing 21 new stations to serve these 5 cities. What's unique about the Gold Line is the partnership approach that we're taking to this project. So we are very, very closely connected with our project partners. Actually, MnDOT has provided through agreement the design and construction manager for the project. Washington County, through agreement, is serving as the deputy project manager for the project. So the principal project partners are very closely integrated, not just at the policymaker level, but shoulder to shoulder as we're working through everyday project issues as a team in the project office. So it's been a very successful approach as we're beginning the project, and really has been essential to the success of our progress to date. The Gold Line project is a federal New Starts project, so it's part of the larger New Starts program. Right now, we're in the project development phase. We entered that phase in January of 2018. During project development, you complete environmental review, you advance the design of your project, and you engage the public as you're undertaking those activities. So we're a little over halfway through the project development timeframe. We are scheduled to wrap that up and complete all the requirements of PD early next year, which would allow us to progress into the next phase, which is the engineering phase, and then eventually to construction, and then toward planned revenue service around 2024, pending available funding. So we're happy to be on schedule and continue this work forward. From a funding standpoint, the project development phase is fully funded from a combination of state and county funding sources in the amount of about $25 million. We're tracking very well along this budget timeframe for this 2-year period. The bigger funding picture for the project is between $415 and $439 million. An update to that is in progress, generally split between the counties and then the FTA at approximately 45%. There are also some additional pedestrian improvements that are contemplated to be delivered through the project that the Corridor Management Committee for the Gold Line will be reviewing this spring and ultimately making a decision on. The major council action ahead, probably this fall, would be confirming the scope and the amounts, the budget for this project when we apply to enter New Starts engineering. At that point, you lock in the project cost that the FTA would be willing to pay for. So it's strategically important on what you include in the project and then where the funds will come from for the project, but generally from the counties. I'll give a quick preview, but we will be back again in 4 weeks to talk about the Arterial Brt Projects in a bit more detail. These are the most numerous projects that we have in the BRT program, but they're generally smaller than the other 2 that I've described so far tonight. The A-Line we have in service. It opened in 2016. Ridership has been very successful on the A-Line. It was roughly a $27 million project. A lot of success with that effort that's really helped propel some of the other lines forward. We'll be opening the C line this June, on June 8th. So we're very excited for that to move forward. It'll introduce electric buses to the region. So we're getting those ready and very excited about that transformative potential in terms of the propulsion of these vehicles. D-line is shown in bold here, in part because it's our biggest engineering focus right now on the Arterial Brt side. It's also the focus of a tour next week, so that'll be coming up. It's also the focus of the governor's bonding proposal. So the governor has recommended $20 million of bonding in the current legislative session to complete the funding of the D-line. So you'll hear more about this. We have $55 million identified and $20 million to go, which the governor has recommended that the legislature award. That would complete the funding for the D-line project. The B-line and the E-line are also in progress. They'll be coming up soon, but these aren't the only lines. We've studied a number of lines in the past. There's other lines that we've heard interest in but haven't studied yet, and we'll be bringing those together and engaging you as we're moving forward very soon on a bus network improvement plan that we hope to bring back very shortly as we begin a regional conversation about our vision for the bus system, and then translating that into specific improvements in the coming year and a half or 2 years. I'll pause there before talking about one more BRT project, just to see if there's any questions at this point.
Are there any questions? I have a question. Can you speak to the difference between small starts and new starts and what differentiates them?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Great question. So both of these are programs within the Federal Capital Investment Grant program, Section 5309. Small starts are projects that cost less than $300 million total and are seeking $100 million or less of federal assistance. New starts projects are the projects larger than those.
Thank you. Other questions? No? Please continue.
Great. Rush Line BRT is a project that is actually currently led by Ramsey County Regional Railroad Authority. So this is a project that the council anticipates we will be receiving and implementing, but at the current phase, it is led by Ramsey County. This is a dedicated guideway BRT project that begins here in downtown St. Paul at Union Depot and ends in downtown White Bear Lake. There's really 3/3 to this project as I think about it. 1/3 is mostly street running along Phelan Boulevard and along Robert Street into downtown St. Paul. About 1/3 of the project is on current rail right-of-way that Ramsey County Regional Railroad Authority owns. And then 1/3 of the project is along Highway 61 in the Northeast Metro. So each of these are slightly different operating environments, but in each case, the plan is that there would be a dedicated lane or dedicated guideway for buses traveling along the corridor with about 20 stations along the line. Where we are in the transitway development process is prior to the entry to New Start's project development. So we are advancing environmental analysis alongside the county is advancing this phase of the project. We are assisting the county in these efforts. During this environmental analysis phase, they're anticipating completing environmental review and preparing concept project design prior to when the council will take over the project. At that point, when the project is ready to enter project development, the council would assume leadership and then see the project through implementation and then would operate the project. So during this environmental analysis phase, we're actually on the second year of it. So there's essentially 4 different buckets of activity. There's station area planning that the county is leading. There's preliminary engineering. This is really the technical work of developing the concepts for the project. There's environmental analysis. So that's a combination of data collection, technical analysis, and federal partnership. Then there's preparing for the New Starts process. So ensuring that the project will be not just qualified, but actually competitive in the New Starts process. During all of these steps, as we get progressively more detailed, we're also engaging the community. So significant integration across all of these other efforts. As we're engaging the community, there's actually a significant workshop underway as we speak today but continuous public engagement throughout the corridor is a priority of the counties, and certainly one that the council is supporting as well. The anticipated costs and funding, the previous phase planning work in the previous phase of this project, the cost estimate was between 420 and 475 million. So a significant investment to create that dedicated guideway. Scope refinements are underway, so there is some cost savings that may be identified, some additional costs that may be identified, ultimately coming together over this next 2 years. And then the council would be anticipate leading that project when it becomes ready to enter project development. At this point, the anticipated project funding is that about half the project would be paid by the federal New Starts program, the other half being provided by Ramsey County. The current phase of work, this 2-year period, is fully funded by Ramsey County. It would not become part of this 420 to 475 million. It's incurred ahead of that actual full project phase. So the county is taking the lead on that work to prepare the project for that point, but then the full project would be funded half federal, half county.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Madam Chair.
Councilmember Intel.
Recognizing that Ramsey County is taking the lead on it, are you aware of any pushback along the route, and in particular in White Bear Lake?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember Vento, there has been significant discussion in White Bear Lake. There were a number of different alternatives that were identified as potential terminal locations. There is significant concern from area businesses and residents about the introduction of transit to White Bear Lake, because it's a significant change from today's conditions, as well as where the transit would occur. In the last last month, in February, a combination of city actions signaled support for the project overall, for a location on the northern end of downtown, as well as the ongoing direction for ongoing design refinement of the planned terminal location. So certainly an area of continued focus as the county and the city work together. The council is working with them both to ensure that they're following the right process, but also that the outcome is something we can operate with a bus. And so that work will continue, I'm sure.
Madam Chair, I have one more question. What consideration has there been given, if any, to extending this beyond White Bear into Washington County, Hugo, Forest Lake, that area?
Madam Chair and Council Member, that was certainly something that was looked at during the previous phase, which was to identify the mode and alignment through a lot of different considerations. The LPA, the locally preferred alternative that the cities and county voted on through their corridor commission was to end in downtown White Bear. So that's been the focus to date.
Any other questions? Please.
Madam Chair, council members, Nick Thompson, Director of MTS here at the council. I am going to talk about the last project before you today, the Riverview project. This is the one most recently adopted into the DPP. A month ago, the previous council to you, adopted this into our transportation policy plan in our current revenue scenario in late March. In late 2017, early 2018, this is again a Ramsey County-led project. That is in both Ramsey County and Hennepin County. But a locally preferred alternative was adopted at the local level, and that is what we brought into the TPP last month. And that recommends the mode of modern streetcar, which is the first time modern streetcar would be in the Twin Cities area. And it generally has an alignment that begins at Union Depot, generally runs along West 7th Street, crosses the river near Fort Snelling, and then connects up with the Blue Line at the Fort Snelling station and uses Blue Line tracks all the way to Mall of America. It includes a possible new bridge, new river crossing at Mississippi, though reuse of the existing Highway 5 bridge is an option that will continue to be studied. And then a potential tunnel under Fort Snelling area is in the locally preferred alternative. So what is modern streetcar? This is a mode that is active in several cities around the country. Just pictures of 4 different locations here: Portland, Seattle, Atlanta, and Detroit are fairly new services in these communities. To the customer, a lot of it will look just like a light rail transit. They'll have similar vehicle type, though they're shorter, less capacity. They have the same payment systems. They'll be branded as Metro, just like LRT. But they do have the ability to share the lane with regular cars. So if you think about how narrow West 7th is, it's an important mode where in some portions of West 7th, the traffic will be traveling in the same lane as the modern streetcar. And so there's some differences, but the benefit to our region is it also interlines with our LRT. So in portions of this route, it'll be sharing track with existing LRT systems. So it's a good hybrid between for the conditions that we're on this route. Here's what we discovered. So it's the route that we have here. We're in this fairly early stage. The way to think about it, this is a line that will open in 2031, anticipated schedule. We're kind of at a place where 10 years from today, we'd be where we're at with Southwest LRT. Not quite ready for construction, so we have a long time ahead of us, a lot of work to do that begins really this year. We're transitioning to a new phase of the project. This is a route that is roughly 11.7 miles in length, and counting some of that on shared track. We'll anticipate to have 20 different stations along this route. Some of those stations exist today, like at Mall of America or at the airport. High frequency like LRT every 10 minutes. If you were to travel from Union Depot to the Mall of America, it would be a 44-minute trip. But like Green Line, there's a lot of trips through that don't go end to end, and so a lot of the shorter trips between different destinations. There's major destinations on this route. 2015 anticipated to be about if it was open in 2015, about 14,000 riders on a daily basis, growing to 20,000 daily riders on this route. So financially, this is like the other transitways. And by adopting it in the TPP, we are recognizing that it is a funded project. There is sufficient funding identified to build this project at a cost of a little over $2 billion. And again, it's capital-wise anticipation that it's county and federal in building this project. And as part of the CTIP dissolution, there's a division between the share that is Ramsey County and the share that is Hennepin, with Ramsey County paying 70% of the local share and Hennepin at roughly 30% based on the length of the line in each of those counties. And then this is a line like the Blue Line extension where there is an assumption that once it's in operation, the state has a role in half of the cost of the operating after passenger fares. So we've given you a lot of projects tonight, and guess what? There's a lot more. And I just want to point to one thing and how we're communicating this level of information to the public, the legislature, policymakers. Is last year in the fall, we produced this report, which identifies this level of information for all the major transit investments that are existing or planned in this region that are either council-led, county-led, some of the major bus systems. The U of M has projects in here. This was an effort put forward by a law passed by the legislature that is really trying to anticipate what is the overall picture of the region of what's going to be invested in transit, what is the anticipated transit revenues for the region, and trying to get an understanding about, matching revenues with the overall planned investments. And this is becoming, I think, a good source that we use, that we are required to update every 2 years with new financial numbers, new ridership numbers, new project status. It's one that we gather the information that's presented to the public and make sure it's current. And so I think this is something we'll be using going forward, but it really does paint a picture of where our region's going, what we can count on to be investment that's both in line with our transportation policy plan, but really with what the local agencies are developing too. So this is, there's projects in here that are beyond even 2040 that have been through different planning stages that we didn't talk about. So it's a good resource because there's many projects in a lot of your areas that are covered in this report. So with that, Madam Chair, to answer questions about the Riverview or any other
questions
you would have.
Yes, Councilmember Hudson.
Not me? No. Go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead,
Me?
Councilmember Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Thompson, there is some concern that the current alignment here does not connect with the Ford site redevelopment. Could you speak to that?
Madam Chair, council member, yes, as they're developing the locally preferred alternative, at that stage, they're studying multiple routes, but two primary ones were along West 7th Highway 5, and another one that would go up through Highland, possibly reuse the rail line that is there and connect. At the time, obviously, the Ford site was being developed and anticipated growth, so those alignments were considered, and that Ford or Highland alignment would cross Ford Parkway most likely, or a new bridge, and connect in with the blue line near 46. The locally preferred alternative decided that the best route is the one that I presented tonight, based on a few factors. Number one, a higher ridership, kind of serves the need of where they're trying to, the markets from downtown St. Paul trying to connect to the airport. It's a much longer travel time to go through the Ford site area, and some other cost reasons that they identified that the best alternative is the one that is presented. But they also, as part of the locally preferred option, they recommended further study in that area to see what transit needs should be developed in that area to provide good transit and connection to the transitways. And so that that further study has not started yet, but the council will be part of that with the counties and the city on that effort going forward. And there's still some, where we're at in the project this early is there's still some options for where the river crossing exactly is. BRT will continue through a process as an alternative, though the locally preferred alternative is modern streetcar. So many routes were studied, including that route, but those policymakers deciding and all the communities adopting the resolution that supported this current route.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fort Snelling has a lot of traumatic history in our local and national memory. The Dred Scott case was kicked off when he sought refuge there, especially with the historical trauma of the Native Americans. Can you speak to what kind of engagement we've done with the indigenous communities about how they feel about the track this route going by Fort Snelling?
Sure, Madam Chair, council members, that is a great question. That is one of the top we see as one of the top issues in developing this project is that area. The county, through the county, did the process at the locally preferred alternative and did engagement at tribal community levels. Some engagement, though I don't believe there was a lot of participation at that phase. When we went to the public comment period of the TPP to adopt this, the council specifically reached out to all the federally recognized tribes and met with many of them, either at a staff level or a government-to-government level, to both make them aware that the council had this decision before them to adopt it or not and seeking their input, but also to talk about the process over the next 10 years and get input about how they would like to engage in the discussion about should this line be built on this alignment, how can we best build it if it is, and how can we get input. And so we received a lot of input at that process, and we, as part of the council adoption of the TPP, there was a recommendation that we develop an MOU with Ramsey County on how this project will go forward, and Hennepin County. And one of those parts of that MOU will be how we engage on tribal relations and how do we make decisions and get input about the decisions, particularly around that area, as well as the other parts of the project. So the tribal communities are very aware of this project, I would say, at this point. But in many of the comments that we received is that they are reserving judgment until there's more information developed, and especially as we're entering that draft environmental stage, that's where a lot of the information that they have questions about is collected, and we gather information. So they chose to reserve judgment at that time about the project at this point.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Other questions? Yes.
I do, Madam Chair, Mr. Thompson. Does this use an overhead gantry system for electric propulsion?
Madam Chair, council member, the pictures of the ones that I showed you did, but as we know, this project has 10 years before it is in development. There are places that are using batteries to operate portions of this, either on parts of the line, and we think that's a developing technology. So there's still opportunities that the technology used for this could change. But for our cost estimating, we did assume overhead at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Ferguson.
How do we sort of decide which projects we're going to move forward? So if you look at some of these, look at the orange line, 26,000 passengers, I think that's daily passengers for 150 million. Riverview is $2 billion moving only 20,000 passengers. The A line was 25 million moving, I don't remember, the number of passengers. So
About 5,000 a day, Madam Chair.
5,000 a day. So, when you think about where we could make, whether, let's say, it's 2 billion for this, how do we decide if that's the best investment to maximize our transit infrastructure versus, a different BRT line? Or, if you look at the Gold Line where you have a fixed guideway, which is obviously much more expensive than, let's say, doing a highway BRT. How do we make those decisions, or how do we think about that? I know it's probably a very detailed question, but are there sort of some broad guidelines that we think about?
Madam Chair, council members, that is a great and complicated question. Planning process. There's, looking at system level where the transit markets are and where potential markets would be is at the highest level. We're looking at where good investments would be, we, the region. And as we start to narrow down, and local partners are often the early leads on a corridor led, especially on these projects where the counties are the funding partner. And the locals kind of develop that early project once it's decided there's a project area defined, and they're going through they're convening and looking at a broad array of potential solutions for transit. Even on Riverview, they started with multiple types of modes, multiple alignments, but it started with the need that there is a need in a market for transit in this general corridor. There's local partners willing to fund a portion of it, the projects that could be competitive. And in that, once you're at the corridor level, the criteria are developed about what the priorities are, trade-offs are made, and so decisions are made about mode and alignment at that level. And that's how Riverview came about. To the local process, that was defined in that corridor as the best mode that was financially viable, that met the objectives of that corridor. A-line was a different process that said, we have good transit service here. Arterial BRT would be an enhancement on that. So different modes depending on where a corridor is at. And it's complicated because some modes do not work for different alignments, and you really want to align the right market area with the right mode and the funding partner. When CTIB was, the counties were together, they peeled off in the types of modes that they would fund, where the fixed or the guide transitways, mostly LRT, commuter rail, or these dedicated. That was the area that they focused on, and they developed their corridors around what they were interested in funding. We, as the council and Metro Transit, are really the lead on the arterial BRT, and so finding the right corridors for that mix. And so it really depends on a multitude of that. But I think for Riverview, one of the big defining ones is that the economic development potential they've locally felt of a modern streetcar was higher. And that was one of the deciding factors for putting that over maybe a BRT system in that corridor. So all these develop their own criteria once they get into the modes.
Yes, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Chair Cummings. This is maybe a bit of a build off that question, but what are the benefit differences for the streetcar versus an electric BRT vehicle? Like, when do you make the choice what's the difference or the benefits, or vice versa? I don't know that that's a really clear question.
Right.
So feel free to ask for clarification.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, I can think about it in terms of how it went through the Riverview process, because those are the decisions really that it came down to. It was a modern streetcar and almost an arterial BRT type or a dedicated mix. And the modern streetcar had a higher capacity could carry more riders versus the buses on that corridor. And so that was important for that ridership level that they projected. The travel times, I believe, were similar. There was clearly a understanding that a modern streetcar would lead to more development than the arterial BRT. That was the local decision on that, so that was a deciding factor. And also on that route, how it connects with the Green Line downtown here, and then once you get to the Fort Snelling station and Mall of America and airport, being able to use that existing track system out there was an important deciding factor in that case, because you're not having you have the infrastructure already in place, particularly at the airport with the tunnel system and connections there. So those are some of the deciding factors on that alignment. But on another alignment, it clearly could be arterial BRT becomes the preferred over a modern streetcar or LRT. That is a decision that can be made and an outcome that we don't predetermine going into it. It's that process and evaluation that really leads to hopefully the right choice of mode.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
And I think I heard you explain somewhere in this presentation that once the project has been built, there's a determination that the state should pick up some operational funding. So is that formula different for different types of projects? And how is that operational gap after fair determined? And then how will we know that there's sustainable funding for future projects that we have in the TPP?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, that's a great question. So if we think about the light rail transit system, state law defines the operating cost. They say that after revenue, which is fares and possibly advertising and other sources, it's split 50-50 between the state and the county for blue line, green line. But the state also defined the green line extension, which we're building now, is 100% funded after fair revenue by the county. So that's both of those are in state law. In our planning process, we assume the state law will hold going forward, and so for Riverview, that's why we assume there'd be a state share, because the state law says state will pay for half after, and same with blue line extension. That law is the law that currently guides the differentiation on funding. On that carries through also to Gold Line, Rush Line, Red Line. We have an agreement that the council pays 100% of that. So some of these are state laws, some of these are agreements with the counties. And then for local bus, that is funded through the state shares after revenue. So local sales tax, with a few exceptions, are not paying for the local bus service. So each mode is defined by kind of the state law and how we define that. Federally, there's federal guidance, and we assume that they will be projects that are federally eligible to receive their capital share from the federal programs like we funded. But there isn't a federal participation in operations.
Other questions? Yes,
Thank you,
Councilmember
Chair.
Fritz.
Just one follow-up question. Is it safe to say that the reason why a rail would have greater development potential is because potential developer knows the rail's not going to move, therefore the route's not going to change? Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, council members, that is, yes, one of the assumptions, though arterial BRT and dedicated BRT are a new concept to our region. So, we are seeing quite a bit of development, for example, along A-line. And so those are routes that we know will sustain bus operations for a long time because of development. So, but clearly there's a clear history of rail projects leading to development. And part of that is that certainty over a long time that system will be there and of a high quality nature.
Thank you.
Other questions? Is there a slide presentation or something similar for the general public, similar to what we've seen tonight, or for individuals who are interested in kind of what the ongoing plan is?
Madam Chair, there's probably several different ones. We would have, a great original sources to go to our transportation policy plan, because that really lays out, as a region, this is what we're going to invest in the current revenue scenario of what we think is affordable in the region over the next 20 years. And so that has a whole chapter on transit. So I point for that to be the primary source, but we also have presentations like tonight that are available. Trying to think if we have one that is online at this point that
Madam Chair, just to chime in, oftentimes we will actually send people links to council updates and transportation committee updates as sort of the latest and greatest of where different projects are at. In addition to that, we do maintain project websites that are a source of very detailed information, including presentation links and things like that on a project by project basis. In addition to that, members of the public can subscribe to newsletters or project updates that can come from each project. So they don't just have to go seek it out themselves. They can also receive it as new updates become available.
I think with so much discussion about transit and how important it is for the region and so forth, I know I'm getting questions. Oh, no, which is the E line? What's the gold? Where's the rush line? And for people to be able to kind of, rather than just going project by project, but kind of have an overview in a fairly simple form to be able to discover what it is that we're all excited about, I think is very helpful for the public. So, other questions? Comments? A lot of information. I bet we'll be hearing more. Thank you. For our final item today is information on the TPP Amendment Number 2, presented by Metropolitan Transportation Services Deputy Director Amy Benowitz. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. As you just stated, I guess, I am Amy Benowitz, Deputy Director of MTS. As part of that role, I lead the Council's long-range transportation planning efforts, and then also the activities the Council undertakes related to its role as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the region. So today I'm going to be covering an overview of an action on a TPP amendment that you will be asked to take in a couple weeks from now. And in addition, we have a public hearing on this item coming up next Tuesday, April 2nd. It's a special meeting just for the public hearing that you are all asked to be present for, so that's a little bit out of your normal schedule, and hope you have that on your agenda. I want to say I'm super impressed by the questions that are coming forward, so as I'm moving along, feel free to stop me and ask for additional details that I'm not covering. So as you know, the Council adopts system plans, and specifically today I'm going to be talking about the Transportation Policy Plan, the Surface Transportation System Plan, which the last Council updated and adopted in October of 2018. So once system plans or policy plans are adopted, they can periodically be changed by the Council. There are two kinds of actions that you might be asked to take to change the transportation policy plan. The first is a full TPP amendment, which I'm going to be talking about today. The second type of a change is called an administrative modification. It tends to be a small change related to policy or even just wording in the TPP document. And that type of a change, you'll also be seeing one in a couple weeks. And that type of a change goes through a Council approval, but it does not involve a full public comment process. So once the Council approves it, we just post it in the final document. So full amendments are required when a new project is either being added or removed to the plan, or when there is a significant change to a major project scope. And that's for a project that's already identified in the plan. And amendments are also required if a major project has a significant change in its cost and the cost that was assumed in the plan when we produced it. So the amendments, we're talking about two separate amendments today, and they do both of these things. They both change, the gold line changes the project scope, and then the I-94 project changes both its scope and the cost for the project. So I'll go over the details of that. As we have TPP amendments come forward, we review them for the project's impacts on regional finance and also whether it can be reasonably assumed that the project is funded before it goes into the plan.
And then we look at impacts on the environment and air quality, equity, environmental justice, and then changes that the project will make to our regional performance outcomes. And these are not outcomes specific to the project. They're, if we look region-wide, what are their outcomes? And in this instance, a couple of those outcomes might be total vehicle delay within the region or total system ridership of the transit system. So the draft amendment today is, I'm giving you an overview. It was approved to go out as a draft for public comment by the previous council in February. And then, as I indicated, we go through a public hearing process. That's next Tuesday. 10 days later, on April 11th, the public comment closes. We summarize public comments from this process. Then we come back to the council, Transportation Committee and council, give you an overview of the comments received, how we responded to them in a public comment report, and then make a recommendation whether or not there should be a full final approval of the amendment. So that's the process that we're going to be continuing on in the next few weeks. So specific to the amendment that is out for public comment, as I indicated, it makes changes to the Gold Line Transitway, which you heard about in Charles's presentation earlier, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. The Gold Line is the alignment that currently follows I-94 from St. Paul to Woodbury, and the project entered project development about a year ago, and during that process, that's how they determined additional length and an additional station was needed for the project. So the amendment recognizes lengthening the route by about 1/3 of a mile in Woodbury and adding a new station at 494. The previous terminus station was at the Woodbury Theater Park and Ride. In addition, the amendment is changing the existing stations that are in the currently identified project. In downtown St. Paul, they were identified as essentially bus stops, and now they're being called full stations, which means they'll have additional investment in those, primarily related to shelters and fare collection type technologies. So all of the changes to the Gold Line are supported by the project sponsors, and they have given us resolutions of support on the changes. This is a quick look at the Gold Line alignment, which you also saw in the last presentation. The changes we're talking about, the green stations are the ones that are being upgraded, not green, excuse me, the ones in the downtown there's about 5 stations that are being upgraded from stops to full stations, and then at the very end, that small little addition to the Woodbury 494 Park and Ride is the amendment piece of what we are doing today, or we're just reviewing today, I guess. So the Gold Line impacts, the impacts of this amendment really are very minor. We do not expect any impacts to either the project finance, air quality or environmental impacts, equity, and then the regional outcomes at that high level. Even for ridership, there are very minor changes, and so basically there are no impacts on any of those major outcomes. Moving on to the highway project that this amendment is dealing with. The I-94 highway project is currently in the TPP in a couple of different ways. The plan currently includes a project to add in a new interchange on I-94 at Dayton Parkway, and this project was funded through the council's regional solicitation process, so it has some federal funding in it, and then the locals match that funding to add the interchange. And then the plan also includes a major pavement rehabilitation project on I-94 between 494 and Trunk Highway 101, and that is set to begin in about 2021. And then that project had a sub-element to it to add an auxiliary lane between Trunk Highway 610 and then the new interchange that is being added. So that's the project that is currently identified in the TPP. Again, during the project development process, MnDOT did some cost-benefit analysis and came to the conclusion that the project scope needed to add a few elements, and specifically one of the elements is to extend the auxiliary lane from 610 to Dayton Parkway even further up to Trunk Highway 101, which is about a 3-mile lane add. And so that's a capacity addition on the regional highway system, and that's what makes that a regionally significant project. In addition, adding that element has a cost increase associated with it, and then there are other pieces of the scope that are changing. We're adding in a truck weigh station, noise walls, thicker pavement. Those elements also add cost. If those were the only changes we were making without the capacity addition, they would not make it rise to the level of a TPP amendment. But so they're all being included in this, but it is specifically the lane add that drives the need to amend the TPP. So the project on 494 is shown in this map. The hashtag kind of red piece is the amendment piece, and then the pieces that are shown in purple, gold, and blue are the existing projects that are already covered in the TPP. This corridor is going to be pretty busy over the next few years. If anyone has a cabin up in that direction, I'm just going to tell you you're in trouble. You're going to want to leave on Thursday. So along with the project we're talking about, there is another project that is adding a lane between St. Michael and Albertville. And that piece, for some of you not on transportation, you might not realize that piece is actually in the urbanized area that the work that my unit covers, and that project is already also in the transportation policy plan. No changes are expected, but that lane add is also a major project in the urban area. And then there is another project between Monticello and Clearwater, which in MnDOT's term is what we call a District 3 project, and they are doing an additional lane add in that segment. So one of the good news pieces here is that all three projects are going to occur simultaneously. So the pain is happening all at once, not one at a time, but it still is about 3 years of construction in that corridor. So not a lot of fun. As I indicated, the project development, the project that we're adding to the TPP has a number of items in its scope. The total additional cost is almost $36 million. And the piece that makes it significant for the TPP amendment is the 3-mile capacity lane add, which has a benefit cost ratio of 4.5, and then under MnDOT's estimates is estimated to save eventually, once the construction's done, vehicle delay of over 700 hours a day. So one of our concerns in this corridor is that the TPP also identifies this corridor as a future MnPass corridor, what we call a Tier 3. So not the highest priority, but it is a future priority to add MnPass. At this point in time, the complicating factor about adding MnPass is at the interchange of I-94, 494, 694, what's called the Fish Lake interchange. Getting a lane, an additional lane through there as MnPass is going to be very expensive and very complicated, and we're not ready to do that at this point in time. So the project that we are suggesting be approved right now, we are letting the local partners know and MnDOT know that in the future this is intended to be a MnPass corridor, and that they should keep that in mind, and that the new capacity needs to be designed so that it doesn't at a minimum preclude a future MnPass, and that the future MinPass lane may actually convert the newly added lane in the future. So because we don't have a design for MinPass, we really can't say how it would be implemented. We just want to put that on the table that this is a future intent for that corridor. So the impacts of the project on I-94, again, there is a cost impact of about 36 million, but a positive benefit cost ratio. The impacts on air quality, equity and environmental justice, and regional performance outcomes, despite the delay in that corridor being reduced significantly on a regional level, it really washes out and is not meaningful. So those impacts are minimal. And this shows the total schedule. We're about halfway through it, and next week have the public hearing, and then we will be back in front of you on April 24th with a summary of the public comment and a request for final adoption of the TPP amendment.
Can we pause for a moment? Yes, Councilmember Atlas-Ingebrigtsen.
It's getting late to say that all that name. Appreciate the effort. Just a quick question. Can you share a little bit about how information is collected at the public hearings? What's the method of collecting that information, and then how is that then synthesized into a report back?
Sure. The public hearing is just one piece of the public comment process. So during the public comment process, individuals can submit by email, they can submit by handwritten, they can submit a text, they can, whatever method they want to use to contact us, and we make interpretation available. And then at the hearing, they are verbally commenting and we record it. And for those who have written statements, we ask that they provide us with a copy. They don't have to. Then for the process of responding to the comments, we have staff that, first of all, we label every commenter, and one commenter person might make 5 comments. And so then we go through and identify the individual comments, and then we combine them. So if we have 3 commenters who make the same comment, that's one comment, and then we provide a response to that comment. And that's the process we use for all of our public comment processes. Some are much more complicated. In the TPP adoption process last fall, we had 1,000 plus comments with about 300 commentors and a very thick report. For amendments like this, sometimes we get virtually no comments. Riverview, we had quite a few comments for that last amendment. I know at this point in time, we have only about 3 what I would label supportive comments for the 2 projects.
Yes.
Chair. So just to make sure I heard you correctly, if 10 people say the same comment, that comment isn't weighted more or carried more in consideration, it's considered one comment.
Madam Chair and members, to clarify that, in the report, we will list it as one comment, but we number the commentors, and then next to it, it will have all the numbers of the people who made that comment. So when you looked at it, you would know 10 to 20 people made this comment. As far as weighting, we don't really, the public comment process isn't a scientific weighting, voting type process. It's input and feedback to you really as you make your decisions on whether to approve the amendment or not. And so how it becomes weighted is really something that happens kind of generically.
Yes, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to add that at the local level, when they have public comments, I think sometimes, if there's, in my experience, if there was a forum, some of the municipal organizations will weight some of their community meetings and the comments, and that may filter up to us. Is that correct?
Madam Chair and Council Member, I'm not sure I quite understand. You mean they provide us with the feedback that they've heard?
Right, and that feedback is sometimes organized before it's sent to the council.
Madam Chair and members, yes, that's correct. I think what I would add is the best example of that is Riverview, which was amended into the plan this February. And it's a local project, locally led project. And we, as part of our process of putting it into the TPP, asked them to conduct public comment, provide us with resolutions of support, document the outreach and decision making that they went through. And when they request a project to enter the TPP, they send us what we call a locally preferred alternative report, which is essentially a report that documents all of their processes and demonstrates to the council that before we put it into the plan, that they did an adequate local public comment participation process. When we put it into the plan, we're at the regional level, so we are more asking people beyond that local community, all right, this is what the locals have told us, we're going to put it in. Are there regional thoughts or comments people want to make about this project?
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm trying to remember if the Min-Pass lane that north on 35E out of downtown St. Paul, right? If that was a new lane, the reason why I ask is because I'm just wondering about the perception, right? That you're actually, once folks are driving on the lane, then if you make it a Min-Pass lane, folks might have the perception you're taking one of their lanes away. And so do we consider signage, and or is there something like that locks it in? Or is that something that, like if you didn't lock it in a contract, I could see constituents complaining to legislators passing legislation that doesn't permit the extra lane to actually become a Min-Pass lane.
Madam Chair and Council Member, a couple pieces of information in response to that. It's a concern of ours. Converting a lane is politically very difficult. There is an existing state law that sets a date of, I think it's March something 2006, and basically says any capacity added to the regional system after that date is eligible and can be converted. Anything that existed before that date cannot be converted. So legally, we can convert new capacity added after 2006. Now, politically, after people have been driving on it, that's a very difficult decision, and 35E was somewhat of a nice, unique project. The bulk of that project was a lane add, but there is one section in the common section between 694 and 35E in the southbound direction only that was actually a conversion of an existing lane. And the design worked really well. There was already a lot of capacity there, and so that was a little bit of a test case for the region. We have not heard people complaining at what you took away a lane, but in all honesty, there's not a lot of congestion there either. So that occurred on 35E. On 494, we did an auxiliary in Bloomington. We did an auxiliary lane add near France Avenue. Nick probably has the exact location. And when we went through that process, we asked the local community to provide us with a resolution of support that in the future could be taken away as a Min-Pass lane. The project that we're now designing actually looks like it won't need that capacity, so we won't need to go through that process. So each situation is a little bit specific and a little bit different. In this situation, I really can't predict in the future, would it be a whole new lane ad for MinPass, or would it be a conversion of the lane we're now building? We don't know. We haven't done the design work and modeling work to know how it would be implemented.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
If I may add, I've had a lot of experience with this over the past 10 plus years from serving the city of Plymouth as council member and mayor. We worked very hard to get an additional lane through Plymouth on the 494 corridor. And we really had to work hard and discuss with MnDOT and Met Council about the option for future MnPass availability. But at the same time, politically, the corridor was so pinched. Commerce was having a difficult time. There was property casualty loss, life loss. And so we were able to finally get that third lane north and southbound in. The locals, and they change over time, understand though that in this corridor there is the long-range desire to make a longer MnPass corridor. And so I think Met Council and MnDOT is working to make that possibility happen in the future. I think locals in this corridor understand that. I also think, though, that the local leadership and community in this corridor doesn't want to be hung up waiting for the perfect scenario to happen. And that was the case in Plymouth as you moved south into Minnetonka, because the interchange from 494 to 394 would have been very cost prohibitive at the time where limited funds were available. And I'm imagining that scenario could be the same for the Fish Lake interchange. So I guess, the future is what the future is, but I do know that Met Council and MnDOT has done a very good job of educating the communities along that corridor that, ideally in the future, it'd be good to put MnPass in. How that comes to fruition and funding and all that is yet to be seen, but we're talking about that. And I know, I'll be working very closely with locals. This is my district. And then it extends in the corridor of commerce all the way up to St. Cloud, quite frankly. So I'm very grateful to see this coming through the process. The question is very good about MnPass. I don't think there's anything that necessarily mandates it, but also the perfect storm of funding has to happen too for some of those struggles around those interchanges. So I don't know if that's helpful, but.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Not a question, but we ask a lot of hard questions sometimes, especially being new. But I just want to say I am a new user of MnPass, and I think it's fantastic. And so I just wanted to share that affirmation. I think it makes sense for me to pay a little extra to get that benefit of not going through. And we all need a little bit of validation in our lives, and I feel really smart when I'm driving through on my MnPass lane, past the backup of the people who refuse to zipper merge from 394 to 94. So, thank you.
Yes, Councilmember.
I just have a few questions with it. My first one, Madam Chair, and is that on the MnPass, have they considered having electric cars be able to get a pass on that as well as a carpool exception to that?
Madam Chair and members, that has been an issue specifically at the legislature where there have been bills allowing electric vehicles to use the MnPass lanes free of charge. The council, as far as I know, hasn't really taken a position on that. At this point in time, given the small market penetration of electric vehicles, it probably wouldn't be an issue, but as the use of electric vehicles grows and the capacity they use really is the same as a gasoline engine driven vehicle. So it probably could be a future issue for us if it was allowed and the lanes became congested. We'd have to make a decision essentially of who do you kick out? Do you raise the prices? At some point, our goal regionally is to make sure the MnPass lanes are congestion-free. That's what we are providing the region, is a congestion-free option, congestion-free choice for those who ride transit, for those who share, or for those who pay. And so to the degree that we allow other users in, we need a method as it becomes congested essentially in the future to get somebody back out. And so that it's just becomes a policy question of who do we want to allow in.
All right.
Councilmember
Well,
Sterner.
just, Madam Chair, just to follow up with that, but I think it would also help us reduce our footprint on that and maybe help people, buy lower carbon footprint vehicles, so maybe that would help jumpstart it, so maybe at some point it'd be a different leveling of the playing field, but I think it could be some other benefits to that. All right. Well, the Madam Chair did have a couple more here. So, all right. So I just wanted to kind of clarify, but I know it's at 94 interchange and we were working with DOT on that one, but do any of our Met Council dollars ever leave the 7-county area, or do they all stay in our 7 counties, even though we're working on projects outside of our 7 counties?
Madam Chair and Council Member, good question. So when it was in 2012 that piece of Wright and Sherburne got added to the urbanized area, we have a planning agreement with the counties and cities in that area. And under federal law, their projects have to be in our plan and have to be in our transportation improvement program, the TIP. But the funding that they receive still comes through MnDOT's District 3. So the funding that goes to those projects does not subtract or compete with the projects in the 7-county metro area.
All right, thank you. And I had one
Yes,
more. Okay, my last one was way back. I just didn't ask you then, but the Gold Line goes through there. How close is one of the stops to the 3M complex? And was that part of the design too, as seeing if 3M employees would use that as a stop?
Madam Chair, and I believe it's at McKnight, but I'll let Charles answer.
Madam Chair and Council Member, the planned station that would serve the 3M campus would be the Maplewood Station, is essentially located right smack at 3M's front door.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? No. Okay. So now we don't need to take any action tonight. Hopefully we will, most of us will be able to be there on April 2nd. And do you want to remind us again of the time, although I know that we all have it on our calendar already?
Madam Chair and members, I believe it's 4 to 6.
4 to 6, okay, great.
So I could end earlier, depending on the level of attendance.
Okay, thank you. Okay, finally on the agenda, we have reports. Do council members have any reports that they would like to share? Don't be shy. No? Yes, Councilmember Barb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. Last week, we, as part of the district tours, we were out in Scott County for a tour, joined by Councilmember Wolf, Councilmember Fedson, and Chair Slawick, and that was well attended. We got to see some great things, both on transportation, housing, different fronts. And this morning, Councilmember Lindstrom and I were out at the Roseville Business Council, presenting on Met Council 101 and transit and transit funding and transit projects. So,
okay.
And it was well received, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great time had by all.
That's great. Councilmember Sterner.
All right, just a quick report. Thank you, Madam Chair. Last week, I was able to go to the Egan State of the City address, and I was out at the Vikings Training Center. It's real well attended, and I was able to make connections with 4 of the 5 council members and the mayor. And I have a meeting scheduled with City Manager Burns this next week.
Great. Anyone else have something? Yes, Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen.
Thanks for the role modeling, Madam Chair. Last Friday, Chair Slawick, myself, Councilmember Zurin, and attended a transportation talk that was hosted by Minneapolis City Council member Andrea Jenkins. She invited the Minneapolis Director of Public Works and Planning, just a side note, who all happen to be women currently. So it was a really nice to see such a significant body having space over transit in our region. It's a big shift from when I worked in public works at the city of Minneapolis. I had a great time then, but it was nice to see that change. Really well attended event in community in South Minneapolis. So it was a nice event, and lots of great conversation, and community really interested on definitely matters of equity, not just from the types of population served, but also in the types of service received. So supports for people across all types of modes, and a focus on safety, particularly for pedestrians came up and those who are using transit as they're making their way to and from transit stops.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Well,
Yes.
As long as we're doing these.
Member Pressler.
Just wanted to know we went out to the Allianz Field scarf raising event, Councilmember Lee and I and Chair Slawick, and that was a blast. And just encourage you all to go check out these United games because the facility is just amazing and the team is doing better this year than the past. And then I just wanted to note, so at the Transportation Committee meeting on Monday, and then about a dozen, I think, Met Council or Metro Transit employees were recognized. And then at the environment meeting yesterday, I think it was about 3 or 4 Met Council employees were recognized. And to be a part of an organization that is recognizing employees for their work is just really special. So keep that up.
Thank you for that. Yes, Councilmember Lee.
I had my first constituent meeting the other week. Newport Mayor Dan Lund reached out to me. We had a breakfast one-on-one, and I got a brief earful about I&I, and it sounds like I'm gonna learn a lot more about that real quick here.
Other comments from anyone? Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll jump in too. So I was able to attend the Plymouth State of the City this time instead of as a council member from the city of Plymouth, a council member from the Met Council. And that was really interesting because I'm building that relationship now in a different way with my local communities. I also have a meeting set up this Friday with the mayor of Maple Grove and city manager, and I've got one coming up with the city of Medina. So I have 11 cities, and I'm getting to know the lay of the land, and especially as some of these major projects are coming through my community. And I'm excited to go on Friday to the transportation press conference around transit funding in support of the governor's budget and the importance of reverse commutes and express routes into downtown from the western suburbs and throughout the region. Excited to do my first kind of big event.
Great, great. Other comments? This is great to hear. Oh, okay. Council member.
I'm meeting with the mayor and the city manager of Woodbury tomorrow. And after seeing the presentation today on the goal line, I'm going to sound so smart. So they're going to be very impressed because they're going to think I've been working on this really hard. But thank you to the staff for preparing me for this meeting tomorrow because that's what I was going to discuss with them, their issues with the goal line, if any. But now I am in better much shape to be more effective. So thank you.
Anybody else? This is great. I think visibility in our districts is so important. So it's just really great that everybody's jumping in. So thank you for everything that you're all doing. It's wonderful. Okay, does our regional administrator have anything to add?
I have just a few things, Madam Chair. Chair Slawick is in DC right now with the Blue Line Now Coalition, talking to our congressional delegation and the FTA. So she regrets that she missed this meeting, but thought that visit was important, and I know she's had a number of really good meetings today. She will be in St. Cloud on Friday at New Flyer, which makes many of our buses, including our e-buses, with Congressman Emmer. So look for social media posts and the like on that you can retweet and share. She's looking forward to upcoming events. We've got one in Carver. Councilmember Johnson mentioned the Park and Ride. And there's a number of them that you should be seeing in your daily report and pop up on calendars. We welcome you all at any of those events. It's great to have council members from other parts of the region as well. The locals really appreciate that because I think it gives us all a better understanding of what is regionalism and what are we doing here. On the employee recognition piece, I wanted to just let you know that the council's big employee recognition celebrations are in the fall. You will get invited to those. They happen all over the region at many different council facilities and in a number of different ways. And so expect a big push in the fall. The governor has also indicated he plans to come out to employee recognition celebrations around the state for state employees and council quasi-state employees. So we expect we'll have him join us at some point. And then Councilmember Johnson was part of the Greater MSP event on Friday. If you haven't read the book that they covered, Miles Shaver from Carlson School wrote a headquarters economy book about the Twin Cities region and why we do really well. I think it's a well done book. He had some comments about how this region demands transit and transportation excellence and that we're willing to pay for it. And I think they support the governor's budget well. So we've been advancing that narrative and his book to reporters as well. We know there's a couple of them working on big transit and transportation articles coming up as we run up to the end of the legislative session. And then finally, I would just say I'm so glad to hear that presentations tonight were helpful. We do stream these live. Obviously, you know the presentation is linked to the agenda, but then within about a day to 2 days after these meetings, we cut the videos and put them back online. So if you have constituents who are saying, gosh, I just don't know, what is there to know? Say, oh, we heard the latest at council. You can find that link on our website, and they can go to the video and fast forward to the informational presentation and just watch it as if they were here live today. So those are up. They stay up for a very long time. In fact, I don't know that we've taken any down in the time I've been here. So know that those things are there and you can use them or direct constituents to them. So thank you.
Okay. And General Counsel, anything report from you?
No report, Madam Chair.
Okay. Then I think that sums up all of our business. Is there a motion to adjourn in a second?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.